Good morning, kindergarten teachers, and welcome to the 2019-2020 school year. My name is Melissa Trimble, and I am a curriculum and instruction specialist for the Davenport schools, overseeing the areas of science and social studies. I'm here today to give you a very brief overview of the changes that we can expect to see in science and social studies for the upcoming school year. I'd like to start off by assuring everybody that the reporting standards for science and social studies are going to be the exact same as they were last year. We did make some adjustments to the pacing guide, so when we focus on each standard has changed for our school year. And there are some new components to science that we'll discuss in a few moments, but for the most part, your life is going to be the same this year as it was for the past few years with regards to science and social studies. Instead of just a time frame for science and social studies this year, you'll see on your daily schedules that this time frame is now called Science, Social Studies, and Connections. The connections piece we are hoping to be that designated time for all of the extra things to get done that you're asked to do throughout the day, throughout the school year. There's guidance on this in a must-do and can-do format that I will share with you in a little bit, but just know that we are expecting connections to be scheduled once a week in your class, and we're recommending that within your team of teachers for kindergarten at your building, that you each choose a different day for connections. The logic behind this is so if a counselor needs to push into your classroom for a lesson, that they can do that on a different day of the week for each class and be able to complete their tasks in a timely fashion and not have to take weeks upon weeks upon weeks to finish things up. So what we've done with this Science, Social Studies, and Connections time frame is we've divided it up into 2 semesters. And what you're going to start off with in semester 1 is what we're calling session 1, which encompasses days 1 through 10. And we want you to just focus on procedures for your kindergarten students. I know a lot of time during those first couple days is focused on procedures for the students, but I don't want to have you worry about doing a science lesson or doing a social studies lesson within that time frame. So please take the time you need to be able to do the procedures. The one thing we will ask you to do is some connections lessons during this time. When I show you the scope and sequence, that's going to make sense as you look at what session 1 kind of entails. Session 2 then will encompass days 11 through 30, so almost but not quite all the way through quarter 1, and that time will be designated as social studies. In the past, we have taken those standards that align very well with procedures and put them in that first part of the school year, and that is not changing this year. So we will start off just the same as we have in years past. Then on day 31, we're going to start what we're calling session 3, and this will end the first quarter as well as take up a good portion of the second quarter, and we will focus that time frame on science. During this time frame, we'll be doing the weather unit as well as the plants and animals unit. This is a change. We used to do plants and animals at the end of the year, but when we restructured the pacing guide, we now have to do both of those units during session 3. Session 4 then, at the end of quarter 2, the end of semester 1, we will return then to social studies, but just so you know, session 2 standards and session 4 standards are identical. So we can use this as additional time to show proficiency. We can also use this session 4 to finish up any science if needed, if your kids are already good to go with the social studies standards. So please know that you have a little bit of flexibility with that to be able to make that work. This was very purposeful so that we can have those standards about how to be good people in a classroom and give you the opportunity to review those procedures and re-engage with those standards after you come back from winter break as we're closing up that first semester time frame. When we get into semester 2 then, session 5, we are going to go back to science time for the first 30 days of the semester. This is when we are going to do our Project Lead the Way Science launch module called Pushes and Pulls. We used to do lessons on pushes and pulls. This Project Lead the Way launch module will be done instead of our written lessons, but these extra lessons can be done if you have time, or if a student needs to get an additional chance to show you that they've achieved proficiency, or for any assessment purposes that you might want to do. Also, during session 5, we are going to do our extreme weather unit, which we used to do more towards the end of the school year in the past. Session 6 and 7, then, we blended together to be the rest of semester 2. There's two main components to these two sessions, which will be social studies as well as Project Lead the Way computer science launch. But we had to put them together because the computer science launch module is the one that is done by the teacher librarian as a push-in model. And for those buildings that have multiple sections of kindergarten, we wanted to give that teacher librarian ample time to be able to schedule that push-in rather than have to try to cram it all into a 30-day session, which in the case of a 4-section building would be impossible if you're supposed to meet with every section of kindergartners about 10 to 15 days. So this was very purposeful as well. Now, that means that some of you are going to probably start with social studies, and then the teacher librarian will push in with computer science launch. Others of you will start with computer science launch and then finish up with social studies. And there's probably going to be a little bit of extra time in there that if you've not completed that extreme weather unit, you could finish that during sessions 6 and 7 as well. On the SBAR site is where everything is linked, including the scope and sequence for the Science Social Studies Connections time and the Connections Must Do and Can Do list. So when you go to the SBAR site and you click on Elementary and then click on Kindergarten, click on Science or Social Studies, and then with either of those Science and Social Studies links, click on that Scope and Sequence link, it will open you up to the file that looks like this. Now, it doesn't matter which one you click on, whether it be Kindergarten Social Studies, Science, or Connections, they will all take you to the same place. Notice how if I hover over top of it, a little blue link appears above it. When I click on that, it will take me to the kindergarten sheet, and there's your scope and sequence. You'll notice, just like I explained, it's divided up into sessions. And within each session, you are able to see the standards that will be covered. And these standards listed here are the exact way they will appear on your report card. And you'll notice I also mention up at the top when they will appear on the report card. So these will appear for quarters 1 and 2. And then down here, the geography and economics standards will be added to the report card for quarters 3 and 4. For science, only the bolded standards are the ones we are going to have appear on the report card, as they are the priority reporting standards. The rest of the standards are listed here, though, because they are supporting standards for those priority reporting standards. Down here, though, you'll notice when it comes to when they're going to appear on the report card, notice how these two priority standards will only appear on quarters 1 and 2. And then these two priority standards will appear on the report cards for quarters 3 and 4. They are not added to the report card. They are going to be one set for quarters 1 and 2 and one set for quarters 3 and 4. Also notice down here how I said the severe weather unit could bleed from session 5 into session 6 and 7. That's evidenced by this big long box right here. Now, when it comes to the must do, can do master list, that's what is linked on each of these blue boxes on the scope and sequence guide. Again, I hover over this and then I click on the blue link and up pops the must do and can do list. You'll notice that priority number 1 is the computer science launch, which is pushed in by the teacher librarian, and that is scheduled for you in sessions 6 and 7. Digital citizenship lessons. For you, it's not the typing program, it is the handwriting wonders. And then we've got some financial literacy lessons, health and nutrition lessons, any prep work for the grade level study trips that occur at certain grade levels, and any counseling lessons for core. Once you've got the must-dos scheduled and you're on track for them, then you can go over here and look at this can-do list and make some choices about what you want to also do with your students. As I mentioned before, this list is not exhaustive, but if you want to try something that's not listed on this can-do list, I would touch base with your principal, show evidence that you are meeting all of your must-do requirements, and then have a conversation about whatever unique can-do it is that you are wanting to do with your students. As we finish up today, just a few odds and ends. First of all, we will be training all kindergarten teachers for Project Lead the Way launch during the October in-service day this year. We have a full day scheduled. You'll have all of your training requirements met. It's going to be a great day of learning for all of you. On the social studies side of things, TCI Online will be available this year as a resource, as well as any print materials that you may already have in your buildings and in your classrooms. Be on the lookout for an email from me with the login and password that you'll be able to use to access online TCI. And as I said before, the report card language will mirror what we have written on the scope and sequence file. And the standards will appear on the report card as designated on that scope and sequence file as well. A gentle reminder that we have a Google site for the Great Minds study trips. There's the tiny URL. This is where we will have updates of schedules and information for all grade levels, which impacts you when we do the Zoo to You experience coming in spring of 2020. And whereas I have enjoyed my time thoroughly with K-5 social studies, this part of my content oversight is being handed off to my colleague Michelle Harvey, who will now have the K-12 social studies oversight. I will still be your point of contact for science. If you have any questions about things I've talked about, you need some clarification, I've created a Padlet, and I believe this is linked on the main presentation for today, as well as here's a tiny URL that you can get to it. The instructions of how to use a Padlet and post your question are on the Padlet. So if you access the Padlet, you should have no problems getting me a question. I will respond to all the questions as soon as I can, and I'll let everybody know how to access the answers. I wish you all a wonderful school year ahead, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you need support with science or social studies. Have a great rest of your day.